Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah, and welcome to the Bookish Knitter. Today, I am super stoked. I am being joined by the amazing Donna Jones Alward. She's a favorite of mine, and we're going to talk about some of her old books and her new book coming out, which I'm super stoked about. So, Donna,
Yeah,
welcome. How's
thank
your
you.
summer going so far? You've got big
Um,
news.
yeah, so I became a grandma, and he's adorable. It's been. I need some more sleep, but it's been really really great. So, that's pretty much been the focus for the last 2 or 3 weeks has been doing the grandma thing.
Yep.
He was a little early, but still over 8 pounds.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I'm really kind of glad he did show up early for my daughter's sake.
Oh, God, could
And
you imagine? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that was great. I was her labor coach, so that was a
Oh,
really
fabulous. Oh, that was a nice bonding experience for you, I'm sure.
yeah. I figured it would go one of two ways because we're a lot alike. So I figured it would either go really well or we'd kill each other, and I figured it would go the kill each other route. But it was actually really amazing. I'm so glad I did it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's a
she was
that's a
she
great
was a
experience.
beast.
That is fabulous. So we're going to jump right into it today. So tell us about the start of your writing career. What was your first book, and what was it like breaking into the world of publishing?
So I kind of almost have two call stories. The first was in March of 2006. So we go. It's been a while, and I sold a book called "The Girl Most Likely" to Samhain Publishing,
Okay.
and small press at the time. It no longer exists now, and so that was my first call story, and it was funny because I had, like, literally the night before, I had been sort of weeping on my husband, being like, I'm never going to sell a book. It's never going to happen. And then the next morning, like, maybe I should give up. And the next morning I woke up and there was an offer in my inbox for it. So, and then it was only a few months after that I sold Hired by the Cowboy to Harlequin Romance.
Nice.
And yeah, and so I actually ended up selling 4 books that year after,
Oh,
writing
wow.
for, yeah, I wrote for almost 5 years, and it was my 10th book that sold. So, yeah, and then it just sort of all, I guess when the writing was ready, it was ready. And so I kind of launched from there.
So the motto is don't give up, basically.
Right. And I tell people too, like, often when you feel the most like you want to give up is probably when you're closer than you realize. So, try to stick with it.
Awesome. That is so cool. Well, I know you from Harlequin, of course.
Yeah.
And I am a category romance enthusiast. I push those books on this channel because I love them so much. So what was it like writing for Harlequin? Like, I know very well that they have, guidelines and word counts and steaminess for each line. Was it hard writing within those, like, boxes, if you will, or did you find it enjoyable?
It was enjoyable for the most part. So the reason why I ended up with at the romance line was it was really where my voice fit, and so a big part of my journey was trying to figure out where my voice fit within the Harlequin lines, and so that's where I fit. And I wrote cowboys for them for quite a while, which was a fit for me because I'm originally a farm girl, so I liked doing that. And then when they decided at the romance line that they weren't going to do any more cowboys, they moved me over to Harlequin American, and I did some there. I did a few books that were set not on a ranch, and I enjoyed doing those too. I never found, like, once you start writing a certain type of book, even though each one is different, use different tropes and different characters, there's a rhythm to the form that you get used to what 50 to 55,000 words feels like.
Okay.
And it's that you have to, if you're writing for the romance line, or at least at the time, you could have lots of sexual tension, but you had to shut the bedroom door if things were going
Yes.
to happen. And that was all fine. And I think when I think about anytime anyone asks me about the restrictions or constrictions of writing for Harlequin, I think of a quote by Julie Andrews, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I never remember the exact quote. But it's more that the structure and the guidelines and stuff are good because it gives you a form, and then you're free to be creative within it. And I actually find that comforting. So I actually like when people tell me what they want me to write about, because then I have like the framework, and then I'm free to be creative within that framework. And I find that more freeing sometimes than just being like having everything wide open.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's kind of nice. Yeah, I've talked to, like, back when I used to do the Categorically Romance podcast with Bree, we talked to so many category authors, and like even like greats like Jill Shalvis and Maisie Yates said the same thing. Like they really enjoyed having that structure and that, and then they can just do what they want from there. Range you in a little bit so you're not writing 75 million words and then
right. And there is, you do become familiar with the beats and the form, and
sure.
And like it was funny because I would almost always land at 52,000 words. And I'd be like, am I going to have enough conflict to sustain this whole story? And inevitably I'd have 52,000 words.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you have written a number of series, which are absolutely delightful, and standalone books. Do you have a preference, like to series or standalone?
Yes. So in romance, I prefer series.
Yes.
Because I like writing, small towns or families. And the nice thing is too, when you continue on with the next book, you've already have your setting. You've got maybe secondary characters that you're going to employ. Like you just get to live in that world longer. And but I would say only for romance. And as we continue talking, that'll come a little bit clearer.
It makes more sense. But within the romance, I understand what you're saying for sure, because I think as a romance reader too, we all love that. We want to come back and see those characters again. We want the characters from book 1. We want to see them show up at the coffee shop in book 3. I love that aspect of it. So when you did write series, or if you are still going to be writing series, do you have it already mapped out? Do you know who each book is going to be about, or do the characters themselves kind of tell you that as you're writing? Does that make sense?
It does. And mostly I have it planned out, but very, very loosely. So let's say, for example, I'm writing a 6-book series, like Jewel Cove, for example, when I did my Jewel Cove series. I basically knew who the characters were going to be for the first 3 books. And the basic conflict and plot, but just basically. And then after that, it was like, well, could you write us a Christmas story? And so then I'd have to come up with, somebody within the community. And so that might not be planned, but generally I have a plan. And like the last series I did for Harlequin was Heirs to an Empire.
Yep.
And that was a 6-book series. And when I did the proposal, I did, like probably 2 paragraphs for each book, like all 6. And I think only one ended up being different than what I had proposed.
Oh, all right.
So, and one character stayed the same and another one changed.
Okay.
But other than that, I kind of plan them out a bit, but then, everything's subject to change within
of course.
Once I get writing.
Yeah, the character's like, excuse me, I wanted to talk next.
Yeah. And honestly, that's happened too, where I've planned out like a 6-book series, and what I had as book, 2 suddenly becomes book 4, and book 3 becomes book 2, and like things get shifted around.
Of course.
But generally, I do have a plan. I don't just, wing
exactly.
from book to book.
Now, I started reading you because of your romance books for Harlequin, but you and I connected a couple years ago. God, the pandemic's completely messed me up because we both love historical fiction.
Yeah.
And it's your first historical fiction novel coming out in July?
It is.
Yay!
It is. I know. I'm super excited.
It is called When the World Fell Silent. It comes out on July 20th.
Yep.
I'm just checking my notes here to make sure I get it right. And it takes place during the Halifax explosion of 1917, which as Canadians, we are more than familiar with. But for people elsewhere in the world who are not, what happened then? Can you tell us a bit more?
Sure. So in World War I, Halifax was this massive port that when convoys, went overseas, a lot of times they come up the eastern seaboard. They gather in Halifax. It's a deep water port that doesn't freeze in the winter. It goes from like the main harbor in through a section called the Narrows that empties into the Bedford Basin. So the convoys would gather in the Bedford Basin till everyone was ready to go. Then they'd all leave and head overseas in a convoy for protection from U-boats. And so in 1917, on December 6th in the morning, there was a ship coming in called the Mont Blanc, and it was carrying explosives, picric acid. It was, highly volatile, and not many people knew what the payload was on that ship. Like they had no idea what it was carrying. And it was supposed to have come in the night before, but by the time it got to Halifax, the subnets had already been put across the harbor, so they couldn't get in. They had to wait. And so they were coming in the morning. There was another ship. It was the Emo. It was leaving. It was a relief ship. It was supposed to have left earlier. It was waiting for coal, and they ended up kind of bickering about who had the right of way in the harbor, and they collided. And then the Mont Blanc caught on fire, and then it exploded. And it was the largest man-made explosion before the atom bomb in Japan. And it killed almost 2,000 people and wounded thousands more, left tens of thousands without homes. Like, it leveled a whole section of the city. And so the book has that event as part of it, but it's not really the central part. It's still very character driven. So we have two main characters, two women. One is a bluebird nurse at the new Camp Hill Hospital, which is a convalescent hospital for soldiers coming back. And we have a war widow with a young child. And the explosion happens, and the story is really about what happens after that for them, how they rebuild, the decisions they make, the problems that they had leading, like before the explosion, how the explosion changes those things. So it really is very character driven.
I will be honest, I haven't gotten to it yet because I know it comes out soon, and this part of me is kind of wanting the audiobook because I'm in my audiobook phase right now. And you did talk
audio
about
audio does come out on the same date. It's
okay.
And available on the 20th of July.
Yeah, and you talked about that too in a Facebook post about. Now, did you have a lot to say with that? Because I remember you said, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you made a comment of you recorded your own voice so they could hear the accent. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So it's kind of unusual because my first experience with audiobooks, I literally got the email saying we've sold the audio rights, and this was with a different publisher a long time ago. We've sold the audio rights, and then it's like, ta-da, it's done. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then as I've indie published a whole bunch throughout the years, I've also produced those myself and, hired a narrator and gone through that whole process. So, that was sort of the other end of the spectrum. And then this experience has sort of been in between, where I got to fill out a detailed form for my publisher about different things. To give the production team and the narrators, they sent me samples of narrators that they would like to use. So I got to listen to those. And then we were talking about accents. And they said, well, can you record yourself reading a section from each character and send it over? And I was like, sure. So I did that and sent it. And I don't know what it's going to sound like in the end, but it was really neat to be asked to do that. Like, that's a new thing for me. So I literally, because of baby time here, I actually went out and sat in my truck with my phone and, and in red sections in my truck because I figured it would be an enclosed space.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so that was how I did it. It's pretty high tech.
That's awesome. I love it. So, what kind of research went into a book like this? Like, I'm assuming you're a history nerd like myself. Like, did you really enjoy the research?
I did, and it's sometimes it's hard to stop doing research, which is kind of where I am now, where I realize I need on the book that I'm working on now, I need to like not do as much research, but I also need to do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it is tempting to just keep going. But I think when I found that almost all the sources that I was reading, it was all stuff that I'd
Yeah.
already taken note of and stuff. Then I kind of stopped. But I did a lot of reading. Probably there's a ton of books about the explosion here in
Mm-hmm.
Halifax. A lot of local authors have done books
Mm.
on it. Janet Kitts did one called Shattered City, and then Janet was also the one who facilitated the exhibit at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, which is
Okay.
amazing.
Okay.
So I made a couple of trips to the Maritime Museum. There were some resources that I wanted from the library that I couldn't sign out.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went to the Central Library and spent several hours just getting the librarian to actually sometimes pull stuff for me because I couldn't even access the room.
Okay.
Another thing that they did was they helped me find a map of, I think it wasn't 1917 Halifax, but it was close enough that I could see the streets in the harbor and get a
Okay.
really good visual because some of the streets are not the same now as they were
No,
then.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I could visualize things a lot better. So that actually stayed up on I have a whiteboard slash corkboard above my desk, and that stayed there, and I could plot routes and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was fun. It was
That's
fun.
fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see here. So, what are you currently working on?
Right now, I'm working on again. It's a two points of view, two women. It's in three parts, and the first part is set on Titanic.
Okay.
And the second part is set on the Carpathia, which of course is the ship that picked up survivors. And then the third part is set mostly here in Halifax because this is where the bodies were brought
Mm-hmm.
um, after they sent out ships for recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a burial ground here or a big plot in Fairview Cemetery, and so um, yeah, and there's also, again, Maritime Museum of the Atlantic has a fantastic Titanic exhibit. I really wish I could have traveled to New York to when they had their big Titanic exhibit
Oh
there that you could
yeah,
walk through.
yeah.
But I just couldn't justify the money to go at the
I know.
time.
Research trip.
I know. And my brother is really great because I'll be like, I'm going to do this because I can write it off. And he goes, yeah, but you realize you still have to pay for it, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. So I didn't make it to New York to that exhibit. And I guess there's another great museum in Belfast. And believe
Mm.
me, I would love to go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, pennies are tight.
They are, but it's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating time period, the Titanic, and I don't think a lot of people realize that bit of the Canadian connection to it either.
Yeah.
It's just not something that people think about, I think, generally.
Well,
So,
I just finished reading Sisters of Fortune by Annalee Huber,
okay.
and it's based on the actual sisters. Their Fortune is their last name,
Oh,
and
okay.
and they were from Winnipeg.
Hmm.
And so you don't think of first class passengers being so rich and influential necessarily being from Winnipeg,
Yeah.
but this was the family that she wrote about in
Hmm.
in Sisters of Fortune. So it's
Well,
kind
that's
of neat.
really good. Neat. Now I am fascinated, so I'm very excited about that one. I'm sure it's probably been a very difficult book to write and research as well. Emotionally, I'm thinking because of
Both, like, so what I'm finding is Titanic is so well known and
yes,
people know so many details about it that I'm finding I have to be really exacting with research.
yes.
And I'm finding that difficult because I'm finding it constricting.
Okay.
Now I know when I get on board Carpathia and then I take my characters through, the journey through the second and third parts, I'll have a little more leeway.
Of
But
course.
what happened on those first, 4 nights on Titanic, it's well
Yes.
documented. There's,
Yes.
and so, I have a limited sort of scope in which to move. So I'm actually finding that the most challenging part. I didn't expect to,
Well,
but
yeah.
I'm actually finding that the most challenging part.
People calling you out on, oh, wait a minute, you didn't get this plate right, or this. Or, I
I
know it
know
seems
this is
silly,
not
but
the
it.
China setting that they used in the
Yeah,
Brad
exactly.
Day, and so the author's note is always your best friend, where you can
Hmm.
some license with, and there are
Yeah.
some things I'm going to be taking some license with because my
Some
characters
liberties.
are fictional. So a lot of Titanic fiction has characters that already like were
Existed.
real. So
Yeah.
yeah, so if you look at the second Mrs. Astor, it was really
Hmm.
about you know J.J. Astor and Madeline. So and the Sisters of Fortune and whatnot. But I decided to make completely fictional characters, so they're going to interact with people that that of course that never happened.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
It's interesting though, and I'm sure it sounds fun as well. But sounds like a good one. I'm looking forward to that one. Do you think you will ever go back to writing romance, or you're not ruling it out, shutting the door?
I never say never, right?
Okay.
Because you just don't know. I don't have any
Mhm.
plans right now. I'm pretty immersed in this book. I did release the last book in my Jewel Cove series. I released
Yes.
in January. And so it's, me not writing romance has been pretty recent.
Hmm.
Um, but, no plans right away to do anything more. But again, I never say never because sometimes the stories will grab you or an opportunity will grab you and you just don't know. But
Exactly.
I have to say I'm loving historical fiction. Like
Oh,
I'm loving it.
yeah. I can tell, like, because again, we're on Facebook together, and you're just so excited about all of this, and I love that for you, and I'm so excited for you.
It's felt so much like the first time all over again.
Hmm.
Like it surprises me because I've been doing this for almost 20 years and I think this is my 67th or 68th book.
Wow. Well done.
And it's just every time something new happens, I get excited. Like, and I'm doing a thing in June here in Halifax, and my publicist in Toronto, set it up for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like, you want me to do what? And it's completely. I'm doing a book launch for the first time. I've never actually
Oh,
done an
wow.
actual book launch, so I'm doing that in August, a month after release, just to make sure that we have lots of books and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been a whole new experience. Little
I'll have to make my
overwhelming.
way to Halifax in August. I'll tell hubby we're going on a road trip.
It's at August 20th. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
And lastly, what are you currently reading, or do you have anything that you've read lately that you'd like to recommend to people?
Oh my gosh. So
Take your time.
I know. Well, actually, I'll show you what I'm reading right now. That is research. It's called The
Love it.
Wreck and the Sinking of the Titanic.
Ooh,
And it was republished back in, I think, 2012, but it was it was republished on the 100th anniversary because
okay.
it was actually written in 1912, like the
Oh,
same year
really?
as the disaster. So it's very much a primary source.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm reading that, and actually I'm finding the writing really interesting, like just the style of writing
Sure.
being, it's not written by a contemporary person about something in the past. It's written, at the time, and just
Yeah.
the turns of phrase and and the run-on sentences. Like, it's great. And then after that, what am I reading after that? Oh, the new book by Tommy Orange. The Stars. Oh, for Pete's sake. I can see the cover. Oh, goodness. Wandering Stars is what I'm reading next. I'm part of a thing called Step Into the Story, which you know, and that's our June book of the month. But right now, what I'm reading is something called the Persephone Code, which is it's sort of like a Regency set kind of Da Vinci Code kind of thing, written by Julia Golding.
Okay.
Who is a publisher, like we're with the same publisher.
Oh, all right.
So I'm reading hers. It just came out, I think. So that's what I'm reading right now, Persephone Code.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And a time period I don't normally read in historical fiction. I love Regency romance.
Yep.
But I don't see a lot of Regency historical fiction unless it's, Napoleonic War kind of thing. So
True enough. True enough.
So I'm really enjoying that. But yeah, and I just finished watching Bridgerton, the first 4 episodes.
Okay. What were your thoughts? I haven't watched it yet. What were your thoughts? I'm assuming you've read the books.
Okay. So I see a lot of people saying that they like it the best out of all the seasons so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't.
Okay.
I still like Anthony and Kate. But I think the reason why I liked Anthony and Kate so much is that we got to peel back the layers in Anthony and find out why he was the way he was.
Yes.
I feel like we don't have to do that work with Colin and Penelope.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, of course, only the first 4 episodes were released.
Yes.
And, episode 4, there is room for me to change my mind because the end of episode 4, I was like, what? So I really liked the end of that episode. So we'll see where things are going to go. There's a really interesting arc with Cressida Cowper.
Yes.
That I'm liking, and yeah, so we'll kind of see how that goes.
I'm waiting until the second half is released, and then I'm going to binge the whole thing, which is I binged season 2, basically, right? So that's all season 3, but I mean, the books are probably my favorite historical romance novels, excuse me. I know they're not perfect. I'm fully aware they're not perfect, but they're just so delightful. And I think it falls into 2 camps. You either really love the books and you had issue with the TV series, or vice versa. But you've got to make each as a separate entity. They're not, you know what I mean?
And I think that's why I don't have issue, because I love the books. But I don't have the expectation that the show is going to be like the book.
That's right.
So I just appreciate the show is the show, and the books is the books.
Yeah, exactly.
And each on their own merits.
Exactly.
Now, I will say, and without giving any spoilers, Collins, when he starts to figure it out, and he sees, and he gets jealous of Penelope and Lord Penelope, and you can see him struggling with, but she's my friend, but I have feelings, don't want to have feelings. Like, you can see, and I really enjoyed how they wrote that, and how Luke Newton portrayed it, so that when we get to that final scene, and if you've read the books, the final scene is the carriage scene.
Yes.
So when we get to that carriage scene, all of his longing and inner conflict just play into that scene so well. So yeah, I just finished. I mean, I waited so that I could watch it virtually with my other daughter who lives in Newfoundland.
Okay.
So I haven't talked to her yet either. I'm calling her after this. So I just finished watching the 4th episode last night.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I
Awesome.
am a Bridgerton lover.
Yeah. The casting on that is above board. I mean, they did such a great job casting, in my opinion. This is now because I did start to reread the first few books, and now in my head, that's who I have as those characters.
Okay, so funny story, and this is completely off topic, but it
No,
comes to the subject of adaptations. And if you've read the books first or the movie or series.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched North and South with Richard Armitage.
Okay.
So based on North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. So then I was like, I'm going to read the book. The book is huge,
Yes.
And I read it, and every time John Thornton spoke, I heard Richard Armitage's voice. It was not a hardship. So I actually did enjoy the book a lot, but I totally heard his voice in the dialogue.
Yes.
And even the way they wrote his dialogue, like it matched. So the
Really?
rhythm they used for him, like I could easily hear his voice doing it. So they did a really good job adapting it as well.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, adaptations, as we know as readers, can go one way or another, and
They did a really great. They changed the ending in that one, but as far as the actual adaptation, I thought they did a really great job. If you haven't watched North and South, I highly recommend it.
I'll put that on my watch list because I have not watched that one. Excuse me. So, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you online? Because you did talk about Step Into the Story, and we talked about your Facebook, and share with everybody where they can find you.
Right. So my website is donnajonesalward.com, or if you have been following me for a while, you can do donnaalward.com. They will both go to the same spot. And I'm on Facebook as Donna Alward Author, I think, or Donna Jones Alward Author. Either way, you should find me, no problem. I'm Donna Alward on Instagram. Barbara Tanner Wallace and I do Step Into the Story together. So that's a Facebook group called Step Into the Story. And then we're on Instagram as Step Into the Story Books and YouTube as well. So so that's basically where you can find me.
Thank you so much for joining me. So again, July 20th, When the World Fell Silent, pre-order your copy now. Get it because it's going to be fabulous, I'm sure. But yes, again, thank you so much for joining me, and take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.